Hi, I'm Lauren Edmonds. I'm the founder and owner of a school that supports children with learning delays. I'm hoping this space gives you something to think about. I want to talk a little bit about special interests of children and how I view it, how I like to think about what's going through their head and the role that I have in this. I think it's really important to say right up front that we're never trying to, or nobody should ever try to change who a child is. That who they are at their core is enough, they're worthy, they have value, they are who they are. The things that we're trying to work with are not who the child is, but the difficulties they're experiencing that might be causing them distress. And not causing us distress, causing them distress. I think that's a very big and important distinction. I want to think about how often children are quite singular in their interests, especially the children that I work with, the children who come to me with diagnoses like autism or ADHD, those types of labels. They tend to be very fixated, it's an interesting word, on a particular subject. Now, my job isn't to go, oh, yes, that's part of the diagnosis. My job is to go, or to start with observation, accepting the child for exactly who they are, exactly how they arrive at school, exactly how they present themselves to me, accepting that and thinking, what now? Is this something that they're doing that is detrimental in some way to them, or is it serving them? Typically, behaviors serve a child. They aren't actually detrimental. To us, they might seem, or through our experience, because we've been alive for so much longer, we have this understanding that it could become a difficulty, but for them, not so much. So the idea of a child being singular in their interests is something to wait, watch, and wonder. I've seen many children come in with a particular set of interests and get stuck and perseverate in those things. I've seen in the past, so much of the approach is to pull them out of that singular interest. And that doesn't really make sense because that interest that they have is their safe space. It is their little world that they've created, that they understand, that they can operate in, that through their understanding of that world, things make sense for them. They can justify it. They can get lost in it. There's so many upsides to having a singular interest. So who are we as adults to take that singular interest away, or even worse, to make it sound like it is a terrible thing? When we talk about meeting children where they're at, our job is to meet the child in that interest, to join them where they're at, to find them in that space of joy and contentment and safety and knowledge, because they have knowledge. They've built up a knowledge base around the subject that is quite remarkable for them. And we need to see that. We need to observe it. We need to acknowledge and appreciate the beauty in it. So why would anybody have a singular interest and want to very specifically stay with that and push back against other interests? It would be because you've created this zone of safety. So the role as a supporting adult is certainly not to take the zone of safety away. That would be counterproductive. But to find a way to expand that zone of safety through skills, through making sure that the child feels safe, outside of that skill, to tug at the edges, as Anat Bandil would say, to really start where they're at. And I love using the analogy of running. If you're not a runner and somebody's going to coach you to be a runner and they ask you to run 5 kilometers and keep up with them, it's not really going to work. They need to start exactly where you're at, with your fitness level, your motivation level, your experience. A good coach needs to start there. But of course, a good coach doesn't stay there. They help you to expand those skills little bit by little bit, get you fitter, give you more opportunities to try something different, motivate you. A good coach does all of these things from where you're at and moves you little bit by little bit to the next level and the next level. It's the same thing that we're doing with kids. We meet them where they're at And then we get them fitter. We give them more skills, more abilities. We help them to believe in themselves. We motivate them. All of that develops in a child their sense of self. And in that, their sense of being able to keep themselves safe, that they're not going to necessarily have to rely on somebody else to keep them safe, because that's where insecurities can come from. As we meet children in their play space, and Alain de Botton talks about it in an interview with Chris Willix, I think it is. They talk about if somebody's highly fixated and focused on one subject, is that detrimental? Alain de Botton talks about imagine you have very complex dietary needs and you're walking down a street looking for a restaurant. Suddenly half, if not more, of those restaurants aren't appropriate for you, that you suddenly can only attend maybe one or two of those restaurants. The same with needs, with interest levels in children. So if you're only interested in dinosaurs, then that's all you're going to want to play with your friends. So suddenly the scope of friendship gets really small. The pool of friendship gets really small, and children are only able to play with that one or two friend, and only at the times when they're prepared to play their game of dinosaurs. We can't be going around trying to change the world and the restaurants out there, to stick with the metaphor. But we can take the child who's only interested in dinosaurs and start to build their skill so that the world is a more interesting and safer place. And as they build the skill and as they experience more into their social spheres and children start responding better to them, they get more confidence, more brave, and they expand their special knowledge, maybe into dinosaurs, and they expand into something more, which gives them a bigger pool of people they could be friends with. Then perhaps a different game with that same interest, or a different interest, or now suddenly they're in class, and the same thing, a teacher would do the same thing with a special interest, meet them at their point of interest and ask them to do a speech on that. And now suddenly they can do a speech. Now we've expanded their interest to something else. Now can they do a speech on that as well? Can they do a research project on it? Can they write a creative paper on it? Suddenly it starts expanding because we've met children exactly where they are. We've recognized that they are doing that for a very specific reason. And I'm giving you maybe just one or two reasons. Our job is to figure it out, to try and see why it is they're keeping their world quite small. What do we need to work on? Is it self-esteem? Is it character building? Is it skills? Is it confidence? Is it safety, feelings of safety? What is it that we're working on to pull those worlds just slightly bigger every single day? And in pulling them out, you can imagine concentric circles. As we pull the kid into the next concentric circle, they're going to struggle there because new sets of skills are needed. So they build up those sets of skills, which take them to the next level. And then they build up those sets of skills, which take them to the next level. And it's endless. The possibilities are endless of where you can take a child that started off with the tiniest of interests and the smallest of social circles and life circles and the a minimal amount of skills, and we can build and build and build. So if we talk into things like diagnoses of autism and ADHD, we can keep a child's world really tiny by keeping the skill and the life and the social circle small, or we can build on those skills. And they're not generic skills for everybody. They're specific skills for that particular child. What is that child struggling with? What do they need? Who is their person? What are their connections? All of this is what takes the essence of who a child is and makes it shinier and brighter and bolder and bigger, not so that they can live up to our expectation, but so that they can utilize who they are to become more of who they are, not less of who they are, so that they can have a life that suits them and is bigger for them, not less than what they could have had. It's really all about possibilities and potential.